Ms. Bergel?
Yeah,
did you have
and
something?
Dr. Hattrick, this is, I wish I could have spoken before you, because then it looks like I'm not saying something as a board member. I'm saying it because you've said it first. There is some extreme caution in letter B. When we look at specific populations and you talk about enrollment data and you're not attending this school because of a certain reason.
Madam Chairman, my friend Ken Akalik says when the horse you're riding is dead, dismount. So I may be in danger of not dismounting the horse I'm riding that's dead, but as your superintendent, I've got to say this one more time. Because somebody's going to come back and say it later and say, why didn't you realize that? Highlighting with this specificity, you're giving people a place to go and say, well, wait a minute, you're not doing, I'm in.
Let's ask the committee members.
This gets at the discussion that's been ongoing, I think, for the last couple of years of planning for where the children have been assigned and where the children live. So, for instance, if...
And it seems to me if citizens are saying, we would like this, and it's not like, why are we not wanting to give that to them?
And I try to explain.
That I've spent the last 3 years focusing on. It took us a long time to be able to get down to the core root data, to be able to show that there were a large populations of kids that were being moved out of an area, and we are continuing to focus our land acquisitions in areas where future growth is going to be coming, but we are no longer looking at what kids are here now. And then,
so I think, you know, do you need to look at Western Loudoun to solve it? No, because thankfully nobody from Western Loudoun is being sent to Dulles North and Dulles South.
I actually don't know if we have to look at Western Loudoun.
Well, Mrs. Bergel just mentioned she didn't want to bring them into the discussion. So what I'm...
No, I can't provide a better way to word this because I think the notion is kind of inherently flawed.
But you just said you can have all the data you want and you can put it in the CIP. I wish that had ended it. Let's have the data. Let's put the data in the CIP. And I think you're exactly right. I understand completely what you're saying about when it comes to policy decisions and school boundaries. I understand that. And I think people understand that. But where is the harm as a pilot project to include the data in the CIP? No harm.
I was appointed in January.
Who'd you throw off?
I believe they took Mr. Ohnheiser off. I believe that. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Excuse me?
Mr. Brown's correct.
So Mr. Ohnheiser is not a member of this committee?
That's correct. It's news to me, but I'd be glad to let Mr. Reed, I'd be glad to, in a friendly way, let Mr. Reed finish because he's doing.
Because what you're hearing from the citizens clearly is that the CIP narrative is not sufficient.
Right.
Right? And so why don't we just say that this committee recommends that we expand the narrative of the CIP significantly to include enrollment data, boundary data, sub-area data, and then let the staffs figure out what all they think would be more illustrative information, because quite frankly, this is not a lot of data that they're asking for. I know there's a whole host of data that the school has at its disposal.
As well, it is very important to us that we have data where the students live.
Current compromise position, if we just stop at boundary.
But this is where we have to be very clear, because this is setting up a CIP that's not going to be reflecting the county accurately, potentially. And I keep talking about unintended consequences because now I have to talk about more of where I represent, which is looking at the county as a whole. If we're going to make action items out of this, if you're going to do a pilot, we're going to have to do it with this area, because right now, even if I support this right now, I could perhaps support it if we're talking about Dulles South and North, but I can't support it in the CIP as a document, and we're going to put forward a document that's going to have for one area. We can justify doing it for one area because this work group did this. But I am going through my head right now the reason why some people are sent very long on a bus in Western Loudoun for a school is because they could have a school a half mile from them, they just don't want it. So they choose to have their group going further. This is why when the work group talked about here, and if we're talking about a pilot, then let's talk about a pilot, and let's get this right for a pilot. But this is where by right, I think, is a great thing for everybody. We've been taught it. This sort of thing, if we're not careful, we may be due unintended consequences. I'll stop. I know I can't support it if we're not keeping it specific to your recommendations for a certain area, Dulles North and South, because that was their area of expertise, and that's what the work group was doing. It's just hitting me wrong. Something is not, something's, I can vote no. I mean, that's
Yes,
fine.
it's 10 minutes to
Move on.
6.
Move on.
Can we vote this, please?
All
All in favor of the amended motion, which was to include Ashburn and end number B at the word boundary, raise your hand. That's 3. What happened to Mr. Wood?
He left.
It's okay, I'll be the nay vote again.
Are you in favor, Tom? Okay. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor. And how many opposed? Ms. Bergel opposed, and 1
Number 2, planning models. The recommendation is to use trend analysis models.
all in favor?
Can we have staff elaborate on what they think that is and whether that's possible?
I guess we're a little unclear as to what.
But if at least you have another way to look at the data, you might be able to have some level of check and balance, and that's all that we were really bringing up.
Okay, so Sam, do you already do that? Check this stuff a couple of ways or not?
Well, let me just say that, I mean, when we showed this, and I think what we're looking at, I mean, when we do our school-by-school projections, I mean, we look at 7 different alternatives for that. We try to balance that with the building permit activity that we track over the year. It's hard for us to say. I mean, we talked to the builders of Brambleton 2 or 3 times over the year. I mean, I talked to Steve Schulte at the beginning of August, and I said, how are your sales going? Are they still really going good? Yeah, we're selling like gangbusters, unlike a lot of...
For what we were trying to get is transparency, so we can discuss it, but very few parents would do what Mrs. Woolley did, which is take the entire CIP, put it in a spreadsheet, and come up with a spreadsheet and then a bar graph. We're just hoping that someone who's paid to do that, like 2 simple little documents, a spreadsheet that shows it and a bar graph to show, okay, Freedom High School overtime.
One thing I'm trying...
Stonebridge High School overtime, whatever, so we can kind of see what we're getting at.
One thing I
because
want-
right now, to study this huge
Yeah, I understand.
it's really tricky for the public.
One thing I'm hoping happens... Wasting staff's time.
I don't think we want to waste their time. Heaven knows they've got a lot of projects to do. But Mrs. Woolley mentioned a couple of elementary schools that it is going to decide, which ones need to come next. I think being a little more clear on that would be great. And really, truly, we're not asking for 7 different models like Loeb and Cooper. We're saying, a 1-page little spreadsheet and a 1-page bar graph to go with it. I think this could be a 15-minute exercise from my perspective.
Yeah, and I have to go.
There's
to
a motion.
Question. I'm going to call the question.
Yeah, go ahead. This will go on for years. All right?
Well,
You've called a
Questions
question, I
and
can't
comments.
comment, so.
Oh.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay, so that fails 3-3. All right, how much do we have left here to finish?
I need to go.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think number 3, are you willing, is there support in the room right now for number 3? No. So it's not worth going forward on.
Yep.
Well, it's important to note that.
All right.
That we're ending.
The meeting is over.